Thanks for coming. Just speaking with some of you ahead of this, actually this is really nervous. There's basically what I'm going to try and do is talk you through, if you were going to come to Wimbledon, this is the tour round the site that I would give you and the talk that I would do. But actually there's been some incredible talent and some people that I've looked up to like my entire career sat on this stage talking earlier today. So now that I'm here, like I'm forgive me if I stumble a little bit, because actually, you know, they were quite spectacular. So yeah, my name's Brew. I'm the audio and comms specialist at a little private members club in southwest London, the All England Lawn Tennis Club. As a kind of theatre analogy, I'm effectively kind of like the house tech, kind of to kind of bring in. And I've kind of brought here to talk about the systems that we've got, the workflows that we've got, and how we go about making stuff work to host the championships, which you'll have seen on the telly, but there's also a whole host of other things that go on outside of the championships, as well as you know, kind of corporate events and all that kind of stuff. And I was struck by, this is a bad picture of mine of a sign that we've got in the stairwell. You know, where else can you silence a crowd with a simple, quiet please? And it was kind of like, kind of epitomised basically what we do. You know, a good friend of mine joked that actually what we do is we make tennis louder, but also what we do is we actually kind of like, from one microphone, from one voice, speak to a large group of people, okay? So, where did it all start? I say, I work for the All England Lawn Tennis Club Championships Limited. So we host, let's say, the championships. It all started way back in 1877. Here's a kind of a bit of an artistic line drawing of that. This whole sport of lawn tennis, of grass tennis, was coming about. And it was becoming a spectator thing. The first championships, I say, 1877, was held over 11 days, and it was only a male competition. It was just a competition of 22 men, and there was only 200 people sat there for the final on some kind of wooden bleach seating, so the story goes. The event was actually held down at our place called Walpole Road, that's just down the road from where we're now based. And fast forward to kind of where we are, 2024. That's how many competitions go together to make up the championships. That comes to 740 tennis matches played across all 18 of our courts, and that equates to some kind of like 1,300 hours of tennis. You know, it's quite a significant amount. We have two stadiums with retractable roofs, centre court and number one. We have two open air stadiums, court number 2, court number 3, and then 14 open courts that have temporary loudspeakers that are put in specifically for the championships. We also have our public circulation areas, viewing areas like Henman Hill or Murray Mound. Actually, it's called Orangi Terrace. The big screens on there, and then for 2023, we added a screen to the Sullen Village, and in 2024, we added a big screen, you know, a guest village experience over on the golf course. Beyond these, there are 30 permanent temporary spaces. So these are kind of like hospitality suites, function rooms and that kind of stuff. And there are also dozens of temporary structures, some of the marquees that you can just see in the picture here, where we might have a whole array of either live performances, background music, guest speakers, or we might just be replaying the commentary from the match on centre court. We also then have an array of our offices, which have meeting rooms, various AV tech, and it's quite a lot going on there. And we also have our community sports centre down at Rains Park, and the community tennis centre down at Rains Park, and the community sports centre at Roehampton, which is where we host qualifying. There's kind of lots going on. You know, it's a presentation microphone like we've got here. It might be just background music, it might be reinforcement of all manner of things. So I'm going to try and canter through quite a lot of the kind of technologies and the workflows that we've got. I say we crash through quite a lot of stuff, so if there's anybody's got any questions about something specific that we're talking about, do feel free to stop me and shout, but we will do questions at the end, hopefully, if I don't run out of time. So we'll kind of start in reverse order. If we look at the kind of loud speakers as the output stage, if you like, just looking here at Court 14, we have 2 pairs of Tannoy VLS-15s, either corner. This is what we do for our reinforcement of our umpire and also our safety messaging. We'll come to that as a bit. And we also then have a tiny little K-array KZ12 it is on the umpire's chair. The nuance of that we'll come to in a little while. And this kind of arrangement of loudspeakers in the corner of the court pointing at where the audience are sat is typical across all of our courts. That same arrangement of an A-B pair is what we try and carry across. Some slight exceptions to that, just because of where they are. Court 18, which has a big seating block at one end and a kind of higher raised gods, has got a couple more circuits. And Court 12, which has a big temporary stand, this year had JBL CBT 1000 units on it and a load of Yamaha VXX5s to kind of do the infill. But that's that idea of an AB circuit in the corners and then, as I say, the little one on the chair. Number 2 court and number 3 court actually have the Duran Audio IntelliVox DS808 with their beam steering active kit going on there, which is quite good, so we're able to kind of position and focus the sound where we need it within the court. Looking at our roofed stadiums, at the moment we have just 2 roofs. Number 1 court, which was refurbished back in 2019, as part of the addition of the retractable roof, now has 172 Tannoy VX 5.2s at the outer edge of the bowl, and then on the front ring we have kind of 43 of the Nexo Geo M6 units, and they're pointing down to do the kind of lower section of the bowl. This picture here is centre court, where we have 73 Martin Audio AM10s, and those are across 24 circuits in centre court, but we continue on that notional A and B redundancy within the system. Then throughout our permanent buildings, we have a wide array of PA choices, dependent on whether it's a music rated space, a speech only rated space, a kind of like functional circulation space, or a kitchen area. And we have different manufacturers of speakers of different performance specifications depending on what the needs. The vast majority of everything we have on site is 100-volt line based. Okay. Last week, actually, when I kind of checked, I think we were not far off 900 individual amplifier circuits, and that's over something like 3,000 loudspeakers. So it's quite a lump of thing. And that's not to mention all the stuff that RG Jones, our sound supplier, bring in for the championships. You know, there's a vast array of extra kit, extra overlay stuff that gets added to fulfill the championships, as well as sometimes we need extras for other stuff that happens throughout the year. So our grounds, this is our main site at Church Road. And this is about 1 kilometre long from the kind of Southlands practice courts, which you could just see kind of on the right hand side of your picture up there, right down to the southern village. It's about 1 kilometre. That's the same distance from like here to Hammersmith. So when I say I'm the house tech, I'm the house tech of a site that stretches from where you are now down to Hammersmith Station. Okay. Obviously, I am the only sound engineer, but I am supported by the wider technology team. But it's quite a large space. For the championships and for some of the bigger events, we do bring in then a large team to help support that, but that's the kind of space. Okay, so there's all our tennis courts. That's what we're going along. Now, I've been lucky enough to be involved in some big sporting events, be it the kind of like aquatic centre based stuff or athletic based stuff, and actually even the Olympics. And I think what we are, not that I'm biased, but obviously I am, what we have at Wimbledon is bigger and more complex than anything I've experienced on any of the other sporting events that I've been involved with. If you take something like a major sporting final, generally that's one competition that's being watched. Okay, there's one match that's been played out that everybody's focused on. Even like a football World Cup or a rugby World Cup or something like that, those other events might get hosted in different venues, and it's only the single 90, 80-minute final that is in that single venue. From 10:30 in the morning till the sun goes down, or we hit 11 o'clock on Centre and One, we are playing tennis across 18 courts. You know, there's a lot of tennis going on, and it's all happening live and in close proximity to one another. As I say, then just having a quick look at some of the temporary stuff that comes in. Here we've got pictures of the hill, the Southern Village screen, and say the new screen for this year, the kind of the guest village over on the golf course. Here we're using kind of more typical local powered line array loudspeakers. The reason for that is it's easier to deploy those in that space at that time, and just through the nature of certainly something like the golf course, traditionally we've only had that space quite late on, so we've had to be something that we can put in quite quickly and kind of make that work. So how do we start to then drive all of that stuff? So here's just a picture of a big pile of racks. This is our centre court rack room. We actually have something like 10 different rack rooms now. We try and have a logical, physical lump of active drive equipment per concrete lump of structure that we have. Had a few instances a good number of years ago where I had to explain to the chairman why the music had stopped during their afternoon session in the clubhouse while we were updating something in a very different part of the grounds. So by getting to this kind of local space, we're able to have a lot of granular control over what we've got. So we've generally converged on the Crown DCI series of amplifier using their BlueLink N version. We've now migrated to having Dante is a very prevalent transport mechanism, and we use that heavily for what we do. So our typical amplifier drive rack would be a Dante to BlueLink bridge, and then a pile of BlueLink based amplifiers. This allows us to have the granular control that we need, but without needing an absolute plethora of connectivity, and also make things manageable. So typically that drawing there, we have our two amp racks, so our A and B rack. Those are generally derived from two different power sources. They're fed from two physical network switches, and we try and maintain that A-B path right the way through, leaving our mixer to our amplifier, and then out to the loudspeakers in the field, which would be in a kind of generally in an interwoven arrangement where you know, any loss of a particular circuit doesn't give you a complete failure of service. We have to have a number of field amplifiers, just given the way things, I say, like the golf course, where we only get a limited amount of connectivity to. So those we're typically using Dante-enabled amps, be that the DCI DA versions or just from RG Jones's rental stock, Dante-enabled amps to kind of make that all work. There's a big pile of sound webs in there that's our mix engine. I'll come back to that bit in a minute, and I'll jump to the other end of the spectrum to our inputs if I can. So inputs-wise, first and foremost, the PA system was primarily put in place to be a public address system, a safety messaging system, something to inform our guests on site what was happening, and if a situation was to arise, how to react to that. We are not an EN54 or a 5839 system. It's not a PAV system, okay? It is an engineered PA system. Now, due to the clever work that kind of John Berry of RG Jones and the team have done over the years, as it became more important to amplify live sources and live action, we were able to use this safety messaging system as that kind of live PA system, rather than having to have, I mean, obviously we're a very temporary event in here, but there will be a PA system within the hall, but we've had to overlay these loudspeakers, the headphone system, in order for you guys to hear what I'm saying now. So rather than having to take, constantly maintain 2 loudspeaker systems, we've been able to engineer the system as such that we're able to use the PA system for messaging and also then for our live and local inputs. So the safety bit at the moment, that is kind of our front end. At the moment we use a TOA SX2000 system, and that is used almost daily by our operations team to do a test message to the ground, and then throughout the championships our safety team and operational team use that for kind of announcements of what's happening on site. Then we get to the first of our kind of like program or kind of malleable input sources. We use a Glen Sound Inferno for our grounds announcer. This is a gentleman called Johnny Perkins in recent years, where he would give us the good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day 1 of the championships. We use the grounds announcer station in order to give us discrete control over the tonality of that voice, and also dynamic and discrete ability of that routing and control over that. It allows us to dial that in as and where we need it, and that was a step change that we made a good couple of years ago now, but that's actually been really successful. There's a little stream deck sat on top of that Inferno that actually gives the grounds announcer the ability to control where they are routed to, and also feedback to the ground announcer where they are routed to if our team has done the upstream routing. We then use, imagine this was one of the suites and I was going to be the guest speaker to come and talk to you before we went out and watched today's tennis. For those radio mic deployments, we use an awful lot of Shure's Microflex deck-based wireless microphone system. It's really great, works really well in those kind of environments. Obviously all sits in the license exempt decked band. We're also then able to see the kind of status of that microphone. So typically these things are in a suite. The suite holder might use those, maintain those. We might do a daily touch to make sure that's all working, but actually throughout the day, how's that battery doing? Have they put it on charge? What's the RF level? So we're able to get an awful lot of telemetry back off the decked Microflex that you wouldn't do on a kind of more entry-level field edge radio mic system. We have a lot of background music that we play into a lot of the spaces. Not all the spaces get the same music content. Some people want different stuff. We use QLab as our kind of playlist aggregator for that at the moment, which is great because I can then use it to play Christmas songs everywhere when we hit that time of the year. There might also be some local sources. We might offer a Bluetooth receiver or a line in for a various suite holder if they wanted to have their own music in their own space or something like that. Or we might take the audio feed off the presentation laptop if I had audio with what I'm showing you now, and we'd play that as well. Then we might have some well, they are wired, but a kind of wired presentation micro announcement mic locally, something that we would call as our ball girls and ball boys paging. They have a microphone in their space where they're able to page that space to call the various teams through. We also have like press calling and competitors paging where there are people managing those groups of people. kind of a funny one that you often hear at the end of the day is the player's been reminding that the prize money office will be closing soon. So if they want to take their winnings for the day, they need to pull their finger out and get down to the prize money office. Equally, when the dressing rooms are about to close. And in those instances, we use the Audio Technica ATND 8677 bases, which are Dante-based units. So much like these units here, but they're Dante off the back of them. So that's great because it means that we can kind of leverage our Dante network, which we have across the site, in order to deploy those wherever they're needed. And just while it's in this picture, I'll touch briefly. Some spaces also have local control. There's a little touch screen there on the left-hand side picture as you're looking at it. Some spaces we give the user, the suite holder, the ability to control the level of what they're hearing in that space. I'll come on to that in a bit more detail. We also have our flash or post-match interviews. So this is what happens at the end of all of the singles matches. We put Shaw Axia Digital out on centre number 1, 2, 3, 12 and 18. On centre 1, 2 and 3 we cable these back, so we do Dante straight off the back of the radio mic receiver on primary secondary networks. We then also on centre and 1 we take the analog back off the radio mic receiver as well. So an event we'd have to have 3 catastrophic failures in order to lose the audio from that, finals interview. We also use the spectrum monitoring and interface avoidance using the Showlink protocol. This, you can imagine, it's a very quiet RF spectrum for the championships up until the men's final. Yeah. It's much better now than it ever used to be, but at that point, literally, the spectrum lights up like a Christmas tree. So being able to be agile, dynamic, and have very good visibility and control over what's happening makes that we can do have we done everything we can to guarantee the service? That's what we're trying to do. Our umpire's microphone. Now, I could spend the whole day just talking about this little bit of the food chain, but I'll try and kind of keep this bit brief. So we have a single microphone on our umpire's chairs. I don't know how many of you watch some of the other tennis tournaments that happen around the globe. Typically, and I think almost all up until very recently, they would often have 2 microphones. One that would be the house bowl PA system, and one that would be the broadcast feed system. For as long as I've known, we've had 1 microphone. Okay, it keeps the chair super neat and elegant. We then give that as a split to broadcast. Okay, that gives us absolute control over how that sounds. But it also keeps the chair super neat. And we use the Bayer M201 microphones with a Rycote cover. We found that actually they survive quite well when you accidentally leave them out in the rain, or somebody turns the sprinkler irrigation system on them and they get soaked. They kind of survive that quite well. Equally, being hit by a tennis ball. If you look at kind of some of the speeds of serves, it is rare, but it does happen that occasionally an umpire, or certainly an umpire's microphone, might take a direct hit of a tennis ball. I'm not sure how well these lovely microphones here would face up to that kind of onslaught. So, just briefly about the signal path of our umpire's microphone. I said we take that into our house system, okay? But in order to do that, we come off the chair and we go into a 3-way passive split. One of those goes into a Soundweb 8068 in the bottom of the umpire's chair. In a nutshell, this does the analog to Dante conversion, which basically gives us a digital path or a Dante path off the umpire's chair. We take an analog feed from the umpire's chair and we home run that back to the respective amp room or rack room that feeds that particular court. So that gives us our third level of redundancy, because we have Dante primary, secondary, and then our analog path back, which goes into a Rio rack in the respective rack room. So the beauty about this is, if we were to lose power to the umpire's chair, we can still have audio. We can still keep tennis going. Okay. We then give the third output off that split is offered up to broadcast. In more recent years, with the advent of Wimbledon Broadcast Service and actually we becoming our own in-house house broadcast team, rather than typically what the BBC would be host broadcasting days of old, but there would be other broadcasters with lots of rights and access. So depending on who was playing where, they might want to come and take the microphone feed direct from that court. That kind of happens less often now, and generally all the court mixers take for the world feed, broadcast feed, take our split, which we deliver down as a Maddie. We'll come to that in a sec. Cool. But the microphone's not live to the bowl all of the time. Okay. The umpire's chair has a little switch on it, so I can turn the microphone on and off. It's not an inline mute. Okay. I'm just going to do a little tangent here and explain. A lot of the systems that we have at Wimbledon have kind of evolved over trying to, what could be quite complex needs, and a lot of these are systems that have been involved and honed over time and over years to kind of make a polished article. And as such, when you start to dive into them, some of the ways and functions and the workflows might appear a little complex, but bear with me while I step through this one. So that switch is actually a GPI into the sound web into the bottom of the umpire's chair. Okay. That is then turned into an Ethernet trigger, which we fire off to a different one of our QLab systems. Okay. That QLab system aggregates all 18 courts inbound triggers, and then that sends an OSC command into our mixing desk to mute and unmute that microphone into the stadium. Okay. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is it allows us to have a single point where we can see what's actually happening, and as we'll come on to, it sees that you can have a tangible user interface for the operators to see what's actually happening on court. It also means we have the umpire's feed permanently, so unswitched, into our systems. And when I say our systems, that's our audio desk, our intercom system for how that all kind of works, and also to broadcast. Because typically that's why you might have two microphones on an umpire's chair, one that would get switched on and off to the bowl, and one that would be live to broadcast all the time. Okay. We also need to deliver that audio to our broadcast commentary positions. So there's a number of commentary booths in centre number 1, 2 and 3, and depending on what kind of arrangement you have, you might have a big room or a little room, and you would at least have one space. So actually, we could have the the Knightsbridge Gazette could have a booth in centre court, or LSI. Actually, LSI could decide they want to come and write a piece on Wimbledon, so they could use they could book one of the positions in a commentary booth, and they would have one of these. Nixer Audio is the back end bit on it. What we term as their PD Dante units. So this little box here delivers 64 channels of audio to the commentary position. So depending on if this is the desk that I've rented for the fortnight, but actually I'm overlooking number 3 court, but I want to commentate on a match because the player that I'm interested in is on court 7. Using this unit, I can dial around and I can pick off the court 7 umpire or the court 7 international sound, and I could take that into my little device and I could generate my package and my commentary from that way. I say, and we've got a position like this in all of the commentary positions, certainly on Centre 1, 2 and 3. And a lot of the radio journalists use this. So we also have the feed for the main interview room, so the structured post-match interviews that happen in our media theatre take place. Okay. As well as all the tennis, as well as all the hospitality suites, we also have our media theatre. This is something that came online for 2023, somewhere that I'm quite passionate about, put quite a lot of blood, sweat and tears into making this what it is. This replaced a room that was only a little bit better than the space we're in now for doing post-match interviews. Okay, so now we're lucky enough to have a proper dedicated theatre space that doesn't have a big pillar right in the middle of the room, or a ceiling that I can touch from here. Yes, this is our new 120-seat theatre. It's equipped with a Yamaha CL5. We've retained the BSS sound wave processing. We've got the MXA 910 microphones in the ceiling, which do the voice lift and the questions, and a kind of sorry, I'll come back to that bit. And then we've got some ULXD radio mics in there. Outside of the championships, this gets used for formal presentations. We're actually hosting the first e-tennis, so e-sports championships in a couple of weeks is taking place in our media theatre. A kind of missing piece to the puzzle of what we do in here. So the main PA in here is actually D&B Y series. Okay, when we put this space together, I wanted to make sure that actually, when we have our, we've hosted a number of film nights in the old space, which would, this kind of projector would kind of like roll down, and there were some point source loudspeakers in the space, and you could sit and watch a film, but it was a bit like kind of watching a film on the very first telly that you ever kind of encountered. It wasn't really anything special. So when we built this space, I wanted to make sure that actually if we were going to do film night, okay, I wanted it to be that kind of immersive cinematic sound experience, which is why we went for low impedance loudspeakers, right speakers in the right space. But then I was left with the problem of like, okay, how do we actually do kind of maintain our requirement to do safety messaging into the space? We've got low impedance loudspeakers. The rack room that serves this space is not fully equipped with a fully redundant monitored and maintained power source, so it can't conform to part of the PA system. So the kind of missing piece that kind of was just released as we were kind of coming into the design stage of this was the Shure MXN 5WC, the ceiling loudspeakers. And that was brilliant because all of a sudden I've got a network switch on the floor below that is monitored, that is on a battery, okay, that does have a maintained UPS. So we can use that as our root source to do our safety messaging to the space and still retain our kind of low impedance and fantastic sounding PA in the space. During the championships, this is operated by WBS, so NEP are the providers into there. But everything else that we've talked through is operated by our championships audio team. Okay, and we do all that from our primary audio control room. Okay, a lot of the other slams around the world would typically have an audio position per stadium or per big active area. We don't have the luxury of space to be able to do that. Okay, and this also stems from some of that ingenuity over the years and the kind of control that a kind of like DSP-based system rather than lots of disparate remote systems gives you. So we have this audio control room. That's where the audio operator sits. Appreciate it looks a bit like a spaceship in there. We use the Yamaha Rivage desk, and that's where we're getting the on and off mutes from. So actually that physical surface is what is being triggered by that on and off switch, which means that any of you that have been anywhere near a mixing console could walk into our control room and see whether the umpire is on or off on court 4. And it makes it really easy to kind of see what's going on and keep tabs of what's actually happening. I say we've got main desk there in our primary control room. We have a backup desk in our backup control room. We then have the kind of the DSP units equipped with the HY Dante cards to get all of the inputs from the courts into our systems. The desk also handles what we kind of term all of the other gig bits. So the mixer that serves that suite off in number 1 court does reside within our Soundweb world. However, that activation on the golf course, or that activation in one of the marquees down south, or that last minute change of thing that got added, by having a desk with a kind of structured architecture to it, means that we can easily add and control things as they might get changed or amended as we go through the championships. And also, I mean, don't get me wrong, I am a real fan of DSP-based systems, okay? But there is only so much you can do with a keyboard and mouse. It can only do one thing at a time, okay? I can easily operate 8 faders, 10 at a real push at one time. So if things get busy, if we're trying to juggle multiple sources, or we've got multiple flash interviews happening at the same time, it means that you can be dynamic like that and not have to hit the acknowledgement box in Windows because it just wants to pop up and say hi. Okay? So we manage all of this remotely. We have a kind of our audio operator in there, and then our field engineers out in the space, and they will communicate back to this place whether they need a little bit louder, a little bit quieter. Obviously, we rehearse and check all of our microphones, our amplifier mics, and the flash interview stuff. But if there's any tweaks or changes that need to happen to any of that to kind of react to maybe crowd levels or how a presenter might behave, we can remote control. We can do that over talkback and then act on it. Okay. So a slightly wider shot of the kind of whole control room. I don't know whether that makes it look more scary or kind of more manageable. So a big kind of wall of sport. This kind of model of the kind of remote operation only kind of really works because we've been really lucky to build a really kind of strong team. A strong team that work well with being able to communicate back to the operator in the chair with what needs to happen. That operator in the chair being able to understand what is being asked for in the field and kind of action it. So there in our control room, we'd have the audio operator sat on the left of the picture. That's Andy, actually sat in the audience. You can bug him for questions later. I would typically sit in the middle, and then to the right of that would be our audio crew chief and our audio kind of architecture guarantee, and then in the right is our comms engineer, and we'll come on to the comms stuff in a bit. All of those screens that you see along the desk, while they are controlling, they're connected to Windows-based systems, there's not actually a computer on the back of each one of those screens. We use Adalink's KVM quite extensively in order to control the different systems and different services that we're running. Typically, we'd have a computer in a rack room that would manage the systems within that space, but by using this kind of remote network KVM, we can bring control of that up in front of the operator in here or into one of the other rack spaces. It also means that actually, if a number of us have sat there, we can do that kind of whole like thing that they did in 24 was like send that to my screen, or you can both monitor that. It also then means that we can push stuff up into that big video wall. All of those televisions on the wall are actually fed off a Riedel MediaNet Micron, so it allows us to basically route whatever sources we need wherever we need them. And as part of that MediaNet Micron system, I actually built these two 9-up multi-views. You're like, Brew, what's the problem? It's just a 9-up multi-view. There's nothing special about that. But if you look at the audio meters, the meter on the left is what's coming off the umpire's microphone. The meter on the right is what we're sending out of the PA in that space, the kind of AFL of that space. So it enables you to kind of give you a really good heads up of what's actually happening around the grounds and what's actually going on. so we take, we use the MediaNet Micron stuff as well in order to get our MADI links across to WBS. That's how we do the kind of audio exchange, both for program and comms. We also take 36 lines of video from WBS, and that's what we put up on the video wall. So we're not kind of reliant on off-air feeds or IPTV systems, which might be a little bit late. I also have a router panel, so I have direct control over 8 of the inputs to our system, so I can access any of the camera sources within the WBS router, which is really powerful. Add then the kind of 4 Genelects that we've got underneath that video wall. That with the kind of heads-up multi-view allows us, it's not kind of like a Phil Spector wall of sound, it is quite a cacophony of stuff going on for the uninitiated to walk into the space. But actually, quite quickly, with the aid of what's going on the screens above, you can kind of tune into what's happening on what courts, what calls are happening where, and how that's all going. We can then piffle various things either to the loudspeakers above the mixing desk or direct into the comm system, depending on what might be happening. We then, I say, comms is primarily kind of my background, but also what underpins how this is all able to work. Okay, we use Riedl's Artist Matrix system. We deploy something like 120 panels this year to various different locations, be that the Hawkeye operators, screens operators, the safety team, as well as our audio team and the big screen production. But we then use Riedl's Bolero for our field audio engineers, so they can talk back real time, full duplex, and that all works really well. The other picture there is for the courtside statisticians. So on each court we have a statistician which is logging where the different tennis shots are being served to and back from. In the event that there's a problem with their computer, we've used Clearcom's HelixNet as a belt pack solution to talk back. And actually this year we trialled RTS's OMS solution, which worked really well. So I mentioned Dante in a kind of like passing kind of way. We're actually one of the biggest Dante installations globally, apparently, so I've been told. We run, at the moment, 3 different Dante environments, okay? One of which is our kind of closed on our own audio core and edge network, okay? That's where we manage those rack room processing, the inputs to the amplifiers and all that kind of stuff. We then have our kind of court services, our tennis-related stuff. So that's what those umpires' chairs, 806s, would sit on. It's what our commentary box units would sit on. Our radio mic, the radio mics and the court stuff sits on that. That's all managed under DDM. And then we have our site-wide system, okay, which is all of the radio mics in the hospitality suites. Any of those kind of like Bluetooth receivers that you might need in one of those field locations or something like that. And again, that's managed under Dante Domain Manager. This allows us, along with the network automation that we've got, allows us to kind of keep our network safe and managed with what's actually going on. So we have something like 350 odd endpoints on our DDM network during the championship, so it's quite busy. So a typical day at the championships, the team would be in for about 7:15. We would then do a thorough test of that kilometre-long site. So it's not uncommon for the team to get their 10,000 steps in, before 10 o'clock in the morning. We test the safety messaging system. We test all of the loudspeakers in the buildings. We do a day-on, day-off test arrangement, but all of the temporary stuff we test daily. At 10:30, we have our first kind of message initiated from the safety team. So the team are positioned in order to check that that's working across the ground. And then by kind of 11 o'clock, tennis is underway, and we're then into tennis mode until the day is closed. Throughout the day, the engineers continue to do the rounds, kind of reacting to whether an umpire might be quieter or loud or something like that, and just visually check on everything that's going on. Given the scale of what we've got going on, it would be impossible to kind of manage all of that by going into each of those different systems to kind of check on them and manage them and view their status that way. So we've kind of consolidated as much as we can into a kind of single dashboard, which gives us a really good heads-up display. It also means my colleagues in the technology department can also see as a heads-up, you know, is the audio well green or is it not green? You know, do we need to be kind of worried? We also then interrogate the referee system and generate audio announcements for when the players are about to go on court, or when a match is about to be finished, or when a match has been suspended for a toilet break or something like that. The beauty about these being audio messages rather than a text message that you might get, or a kind of like going to a web page, the guys walking around on comms can hear those as a cue, which is super useful. I fear that I've kind of rabbited on a little bit too much about this, because I'm being waved that's kind of wrapping up. So to kind of bring this all into land and kind of go back to where we started, making all this work reliably and effectively takes a huge amount of effort from quite a big team. But just like kind of a bricks in the house, what we try and do is do something simple, just replicate it reliably in order to become a kind of quite spectacular complex structure. At the end of the day, it is just a bit of a wire and a magnet between the microphone and the loudspeaker. It's just the kind of cleverness in between. There's a lot of detail and planning that goes into all of this. We will spend a lot of time discussing the nomenclature of what stuff is called, how it is to be labelled, and then making sure that actually, while that might work for 3 things, does it work for 300? Because everything we do has to be kind of scalable. And kind of the last point, kind of off the back of the dashboarding idea, is to all the manufacturers in the room, you do make some really great products, but in order to make them able to integrate with others and make that accessible at kind of this kind of scale, the kind of use of APIs and being able to accessing all of that kind of stuff is really powerful and really important, because it allows you kind of unify that at that kind of like big scale. Sorry, it was a bit of a rush. There's a lot that we kind of crashed through. I'm about later for questions. I don't think no, I'm getting a no. So I'm here, some of the team from Wimbledon here. Please come and grab me if you want to ask any questions afterwards. I hope that was of interest to you. Thank you.